Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back here to Super Sunday here on Apex Racing TV and the Weekend Warriors series, where first up, as always, we've got the Formula Fords. My name is Ron Mons. Alongside me in the commentary booth is Charles Bichelle, and in the virtual production hall, our old buddy Josh Wilkie. Now, for this round of the season, we're at Rudskogen in Norway, a track that I thought for the longest time was in Germany, but no, it's in Norway, and is one of the premier motorsports venues in the country. I believe it's the oldest permanent-built asphalt circuit in the country, and it's a pretty good one as well. It was refurbished not very long ago, and it's a track layout that I believe Yanchi Lin compared very much to Oschersleben that we visited 1 week ago here with the Formula Ford Weekend Warrior Series. Now, Charles, I want to pass this off to you real quick. We've been seeing these drivers putter around the track in the rain, so they're singing in the rain right now. That's a terrible rendition of that song. I apologize to the people watching this stream here this afternoon. But this track, well, I mean, we heard from some of the drivers last week that it was somewhat similar to Oschersleben. Would you like to elaborate on that, or would you like to actually push back on that and show how this track is a little bit different than that one in Germany?
I mean, it is similar. There's I even noted before broadcast last week that the front straight down into turn 1 and 2, that just kind of the little quick left-right chicane reminds me of Rudskogen. So there's some similarities to it. I think this track is a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit wider, so there'll be some more chances. But it's got its own unique character, especially that run down into turn 3, which is basically over over a crest of a hill into a very open right-hander that kind of just decreases in radius throughout the corner. And it's going to be, it's difficult even, in the dry. In the wet, it's going to be very, very treacherous there. Look for lots of people just getting it wrong and getting off the track. Pit entry and exits also very similar to Oschersleben from last week. It's a very kind of winding pit entry, very tight. And then pit exit just kind of runs right out into the track. So it's going to be one of those we'll have to watch out for again.
You can see on track we have rain here in this qualifying session, and I have a pretty good feeling that we're going to have rain in the race coming up as well. I'll bring up the information about the weather forecast here. It's always nice to have some weather forecast here in iRacing with the newly added rain. Coming into this qualifying session, there was only a 30% chance of rain, and it's probably about 36 now that we're about halfway through this qualifying session. For the race itself, the chance of rain starting it off was 63, so I think we will probably have rain, knowing my luck. iRacing is going to make me look at like a damn fool, and it's going to be bone dry when we head into that session in just a few moments' time. But here, with a rain-affected qualifying session, it could be the reason why we're seeing the order got shuffled up a little bit. It's currently 1, 2, 3 with an S1 driver, that being Sam Spinell at the front right now to 138.246. And then you've got Julian Ditchburn there in P2, and Antonio Reese, the Masters driver, there in P number 3. He's had an up-and-down season season so far, as has his old partner in crime in the Masters category, Jörg Mani. They have both been struck by many falling anvils so far this season, so hopefully this afternoon they try and buck that trend here. You can see them dancing around the circuit. This heading through the seemingly never-ending section of turns 7 and 8 before we have that small little meandering kink there of turn number 9 before we careen down the hill and head into turn number 10. So I think while we're still in this qualifying session, 13 and a half minutes into this 20-minute session, I think we may take a look at the championship points, because we are over halfway through the season now, so we're getting a good idea as to who are going to be the drivers we need to look out for when it comes to the championship fights. We'll bring that up for you in just a few moments. I'm very up and down this season has been so far, but in the S1 category, it's been the drivers up towards the front that we tend to expect. You can see still there, incredibly close. It's Yanqi Lin leading it as things stand at the moment. Sam Spinell and Jason Green tied in P2, only 1 point behind Yanqi Lin there at the front. 1 point separating the top 3 in the S1 standings right now. That is absolutely nuts. And you've got the likes of Michael McConnell and Arrow Gnome running at the top 5. A little bit farther back, Gnome has been racing in the series and has had sporadic results, but it's been an up and down season, that is for darn sure. And then you look at S2, this is equally close as well. David Foy at the front, Julian Ditchburn there in P number 2. We've got Canadian top 2 as things stand at the moment in the S2 standings. I know Canadian producer Josh is going to be feeling a whole lot of nationalism looking at those double maple leafs at the front. That's Peter True in P number 3, Adam Barney in 4th, and Philip Fernandez there in P number 5. Only 7 points separating the top of S2, and we'll take a look at Masters here. Still incredibly close between Brad Cathcart and Dana Bowes there. Only, that's what, 3 points separating those two. Incredibly close fights all throughout the season. I mean, at Masters, that's actually one of the, well, I wouldn't say the most spread out. I think S2 is probably the most spread out with 7 points separating the front two in that category. I've asked this week in and week out, and I'll throw a little bit of a curveball at you here, Charles. Usually I ask you, what's your favorite class to look at? But I'll say, aside from Masters, which is your usual answer to that, between S1 and S2, which one do you think is a fight we really need to keep our eyes on?
I mean, obviously, when you got the top 3 separated by 1 point, you got to look at Spec 1. I mean, it's going to be one of those races, and it seems like that the rain has kind of been an equalizer among all 3 classes, not just Spec 1. So when we get rain events like this, it brings a different set of drivers up to the front. Because we've got some drivers who are just much more adept in driving in the rain from either previous real life racing experience, or in the case of Jim Brewster, who we spoke to, is he's just like driving in snow. So, that might be a great analog as well. So being in Alabama, I don't know much about driving in snow, just to be fair. So I think S1 is the one that we'll kind of concentrate on today, because I think it's obviously with a battle like that. But also with the rain, then there's also the possibility of having alien abductions aplenty. So we'll have to keep our eyes out for that, because that'll obviously really shake things up.
Would try and do a rendition of the X-Files theme, but I don't want to deafen anyone watching the stream here on Apex Racing TV, so I think I'll leave it at that. And you mentioned they were driving in snow. Funnily enough, despite me living here on the northern end, I guess Philadelphia border, well, it's pretty much the most southern city here in the state of Pennsylvania. I guess I won't really be, I can't really call myself a New Englander or person from the Northeast, so I guess I am technically just borderline in the mid-Atlantic region here of the U.S., but despite the fact that I'm a little bit farther up on the East Coast compared to you, Charles, farther up in the other states, I actually haven't had any experience driving around in the snow. See, it was weird. We didn't get snow between, I think it was the Daytona 24 in 2022, when it was the last time we got snow, until this past winter. So it was quite some time. I had already had my driver's license for about a year and 10 months before we got another snowstorm. So it was quite a long ways. I haven't actually gotten a chance to drive in the snow. However, I've gotten a chance to drive a go-kart in the rain. And let me tell you, it is a very fun experience, and also mildly terrifying whenever you aquaplane, from my background of doing autocross with the SCCA. It is not ideal when you're driving around a parking lot in a go-kart with your butt about an inch off the ground, and you start aquaplaning, and then you get really terrified that you're going to slam into a tree. Thankfully, that never happened to me, and that probably won't happen to any of these drivers here in this qualifying session or in the race as well. We got about 2 minutes left to go here, and it's Jorgmani at the front, looking to try and find some sort of redemption after the unfortunate circumstances that surrounded the Canadian Tire round we had a few weeks ago. He was in the catbird seat to win that overall and win in the Masters category. That would have been a great result for him after a disappointing start to the year. And I was going to say that he's at the front now. Is now Julian Ditchburn at the front. They're saying a stormer of the lap, a 137.775. I feel like even though the rain is still coming down, these drivers are finding a dry line because they're finding a pretty decent amount of pace. Julian Ditchburn jumping up to P1. That was a very big time gain from the Canadian driver. So I think we may be seeing a small little game of who's the last to actually cross the checkered flag to finish up their qualifying session here, Charles.
Yeah, it's kind of what it looks like. To be fair, Ditchburn was really, really good in practice. He was up at the top of the board and was actually in P1 for the first part of qualifying as well. So obviously he knows what he's doing in the rain in these cars. So we may see a Spec 2 winner today. I mean, he looks like he's got great pace. And it's just a matter of being consistent for that 40 minutes and and getting a good clean pit stop. And we could have us an S. Really, honestly, the field is wide open. It's just the rain has been such an equalizer, just from people just trying to learn it, and some people pick it up quicker than others. So it's been a great addition to iRacing, even though we've had a few issues here and there with it.
I think rain is absolutely awesome. It's been a fantastic addition here into the iRacing world. I've gotten many opportunities to drive in the rain, and even though I am not a very proficient sim racer by any way, shape, or form, I still absolutely love driving in the rain. My dad used to call me a mudder when I used to drive in real life because I just adored driving in the rain regardless of where it was. Ooh, you can see there, that's Jason Green jumping up to P2 in the dying stages here of this qualifying session. The checkered flag is out, has been for about 20 seconds now. So these drivers are rounding off this session. Sam Spin will round his way around the final corner, and we'll see what he can do. The driver up towards the front of the S1 standings. Will he jump up in the running order? Currently P5 as things stand at the moment. I don't think he improves, so Sam Spindle, the Brit, who dominated not very long ago. That was at Sebring, one of the first races of the season. I think he won. It was quite a long ways that he won by. There's Morn Human jumping up to P3. That's a great run there from the driver of the 202 car, the driver from South Africa, who I think is one of the only drivers in the series from South Africa. Always great to have worldwide representation here in this series. We've got two S2 drivers in the front three. Monty there in P2, and I think we don't have many more cars left out on track, and I think the ones that are just claiming some positions farther in the back. This is Brad Cathcart. This is not an ideal qualifying session for the Australian driver, who's currently leading in the Masters category, currently P26. Will he jump up the board? I don't believe he will, unless our live timing server is running on like Windows XP and takes 14 bajillion years to load. There's Fernando Suarez, who just rounded out his qualifying session. Has Fernando set a time? We don't really have a ticker next to his name. That or my graphics are having a mild panic attack right now. But the driver of the 06 car driving around the track, getting some more added time before all the cars get yoinked back here into the pits. But so far, it must be said, it's a little bit surprising seeing so few S1 drivers up towards the top 15.
Yeah, it really is. Like I said, I think rain has been a great equalizer, and it's not necessarily about your iRating that you've accumulated over the course of your iRacing career. Now it's about, can you drive the car in the rain? And that's really what it boils down to. And so it's like I said, it's going to be some people are going to pick it up faster than others. Some people are going to just have are just going to be adept at it because of past experience. So as it stays in here longer, the S1 guys will start moving up the board, I'm sure.
And we are done with this qualifying session. I believe everyone has been abducted by UFO and dragged back to the pits by their collars. I think we'll be able to get the starting grid for you in just a couple of moments. I'm a shuffled up grid, but I think it's going to be an exciting one for sure. And Julian Ditchburn, the S2 driver, is going to lead them to green. The Canadian driver, nice qualifying run from him. Jorg Mani, the Masters, will join him on the front row with Morn Human there in P number 3. Jason Green in 4th. Michael McConnell there in P number 5. Sam Spinell, the British driver, actually gets bumped outside of the top 5 in the dying stages of the session. He drops down to P number 6. That's Thortulo there in P number 7. Antonio Reese, the Masters driver, in P number 8. Paul Stevens, Bill Walker will complete your top 10. That's Pedro Carvalho there in P number 11. Soren Garrett's there in P 12. Chris Montgomery in 13th. Chris Murakami in 14th. Benjamin Harris and Jeff Jacobson will round out your, I'm trying to do the math in my head, that would be the 8th row, and that's going to be David Foy and Manning Grennan rounding out your top 18. Alan DeGassis and Philip Fernandez will round out your top 20.
Yeah, P21 is league organizer Stevie Ray, Johan Batinga in 22nd, Dana Bose in 23rd, Peter True in 24th, Russ Telker in 25th, Brad Cathcart in 26th, Paul Jackson 27th, John Thompson 28th, Nick Tolo in 29th, Fernando Suarez and Gary Wolbolt will round out your 31 car field, and neither one of those guys set a top.
31 cars and 14 corners for these drivers to negotiate across 40 minutes. I gotta imagine this race is going to be very exciting. Strategy, of course, even though in most rain races you gotta think of when the crossover point is going to be, not really going to be an issue here in these Formula Ford cars, as they do have the same tires in the dry and in the wet. Very versatile, not all-terrain tires. It'd be very interesting to see a Formula Ford race on dirt. That would be, maybe next season, that would be pretty cool to see a bunch of Formula Fords racing on a dirt oval. That would be, I would pay money to see that. I think that is a definite. But here, these tires run in the dry and in the wet as well, so we won't have to worry about that. However, pit stop's always a factor here in these Weekend Warriors Formula Ford races, and again in the spec race of Fords that we'll have later on this afternoon. Now, we saw at the last rain race that we had full-on rain race at Sebring, we were seeing drivers stretch it all the way until the last lap to actually come into the pits for fuel. So Charles, do you think we're going to see some drivers try and stretch out their legs on gas a little bit more like we saw at Sebring, or do you think we're going to see something more akin to pitting around the minute 30 mark?
No, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of drivers that, because they're used to doing a fuel saving strategy, will take this to the 35-36 minute mark. I don't think they can go the entire distance on fuel, even with fuel saving and driving in the rain. But it's all about making that stop as short as possible, making it a clean stop, and just being safe. And that's the biggest thing, is you just got to get out there and be consistent, and hopefully you can avoid other people's dramas. So the first lap obviously is going to be critical, because you've got now cold and wet tires to go along with it. And so that first lap, until you get some heat in the tires, maybe the first 2 laps even, until you get some really good heat in the tires, it's going to be a little bit of a dance around here just to try and get the car to go around the track properly.
And we didn't really mention it during the weather forecast that I had, but it's also somewhat cold as well. Only 65 degrees here in the sim, so these drivers I think it's not low enough whereby these drivers would be risking hypothermia if it's in real life, but they are definitely enjoying the engines tucked behind them in the car, because that is not ideal. I have driven in real life in like 50-degree temperatures on a slightly damp and rainy day, and I'll tell you what, my joints were basically frozen over for a week afterwards, so that is not ideal. Thankfully, these drivers in the sim won't have to deal with that. However, there's a lot more curveballs that they have to deal with. That Porsche pace car has gone down the complicated pit road here. It's now in the hands of Julian Ditchburn, who's going to lead them to green. Some shuffling already, some drivers trying to find their way through the mist, but the green flag is out and the drivers are on their way into turn number 1, where the heaviest braking braking zones here on the track, one of the tightest corners, as well as going to be Julian Ditchburn going really deep on the brakes. I thought he was going to run wide, and oh my God, that's York Monty already going for a spin. That's two drivers, multiple drivers collected in this Schmazel heading through turn number 1. We're running on board with some of these drivers just trying to dance their way around the rainy opening section here of this lap and trying to avoid any of the damaged and bruised race cars around them. That was a terrible start there for Jorg Mani, who has dropped back like a rock through the field, down 26 spots. Sam Spinell was also involved in that as well. He is down the running order as well. So a lot of heavy hitters already in a lot of trouble here in this 40-minute race as we see some more drivers going off, and oh my God, we just nearly saw a T-bone accident there. That was absolute, that was heart in your mouth stuff if you're the driver of the car that was parked, and if you're Dana Bose, who was coming with a fairly steady rate of knots of that car that was parked on the side of the circuit. Thankfully, that didn't end in a very horrifying accident even in the sim. But so far, a lot of these drivers trying to dance their way around the track. I feel like with this race and the start that we just saw, this may be a game of survival here, Charles.
Yeah, I think you may be right. And I think I couldn't tell if it was McConnell or if it was Spinell that was the other car involved in that spin. But it was basically just two cars going into turn 1, trying to hit the apex, one from the inside, one from the outside, and they just collected each other and wheels, and they finally just basically hooked around each other's suspensions, and that was what caused the incident. And right in the middle of the track, which obviously is not a good thing at all. So it was fortunate for a lot of cars they were able to avoid it. At least it was very early in the race, and we're quite up to speed yet. So as we see cars coming into the pits now, I believe that is Spinell, and there's like Carvalho as well.
Yes, a very early call from both of these drivers. Sam Spinell, you can't really blame him. He was involved in that incident. I'm curious if he has any sort of damage on that car, because he was caught up in the midst of that, may have T-boned someone and may have picked up some wheel damage in that. Michael McConnell there in P30 right now, he's also in the pits. I think he kept it on the track and just came back to the pits. I'm not sure if he towed. I don't believe, actually, he's marked as 1 lap down, so I think he may have actually towed back to the pits. Not a very good start from the drivers up towards the front of the field. That is for darn sure. This is Paul Stevens, who's navigating his way through the field quite nicely. Jorg Mani is trying to reclaim the spots up to P23 as things stand at the moment. And I think we're going to take a look at a replay of all the chaos that took place at the very start of this race.
Yeah, you can see it, and that's the 202 car, and that is yep, and you just see them get hooked around, and then iRacing says, you know what, you guys are stuck together. And so they did the little 2-step around, and so it's then to the back of the pack, and so now they've got some work to do trying to catch up.
I think it's some of that iRacing glue as well that might have contributed to that accident. Always, we mentioned it a lot in the Apex Racing Academy F4 Championship that ended a couple weeks ago. Me and my colleague Aaron Smith on that series always mention it, but I think it's really a pervasive feature across all of the Formula cars. We're taking a look at some more angles of this. This is Chris Murakami trying to navigate his way through all this chaos and gets a little bit stuck there. You can see small little tap, and oh my God, that was incredibly close for Chris Murakami. I think I just saw his life flash before my eyes. That was incredibly close as they went through the turn 1 and 2 section. I was going to mention this right after we saw that big Schmazel there. Morn Human, who's one of the other cars involved in that, actually made contact with Jorg Mani. He was the one that kind of started all of that side by side into turn 1 and 2 here at Rudskogen. It's difficult enough in the dry, in the wet, in these Formula Ford cars, which are just basically go-karts. It is a real pain in the butt, so it's not the most shocking incident in the world that they came to blows at the very start of this race on cold tires, completely drenched in water. However, definitely unfortunate for all of them to drop back like a rock in the early stages. Julian Ditchburn hasn't. He's actually pulled away a 4.5 second gap over Antonio Reese, who's cut through quite nicely to run in P2 as things stand at the moment. Then you have Harris in P3, the highest of the S1 drivers as things stand at the moment. Benjamin Harris, I can't really remember him winning in the S1 category in any of the Formula Ford broadcasts I've done so far. So he is in a very good spot as things stand at the moment. However, Thortulo, who's currently in P5, he's definitely within striking distance, albeit has a car of Chris Montgomery right in between him, so he's definitely have to try. It's an uphill climb for him to move into P1 in the S1 category, but it's definitely not out of the realm of possibilities either.
No, for sure. And to add to the more human and Jorg incident, both drivers live in a country that starts with S. Unfortunately, one's Switzerland and the other is South Africa. So to add to that, you've got a pretty significant latency between those two cars, which adds to the stickiness of those incidents. And I just saw Jorg towed back to the pits as well, so I think he may be done for the day as we see Stevie Ray coming in. And if Stevie Ray's coming in at the 5-minute mark and I don't see any damage on his car, I think that means that the pit window is now open. So you're going to see cars now that are going to be able to run to that 35-minute mark during the race.
And I think maybe coming in and trying to do an extremely early undercut, that could be what these drivers are trying to do, pitting so very early on into this race. And I think it could work as things stand at the moment. I think the field is fairly spread out. We may have to bring up our track map graphic to see exactly how big of a gap there is and how big of a window there is if you exit the pits, and you won't have to get held up by lap traffic or anything like that. Yeah, between Stevie Ray in P28 and our leader Julian Ditchburn, it's pretty much nothing in between those cars besides the other blinking out. I believe that is Tekler, I believe, in the P30 as things stand at the moment. He is blinking in and out of existence, keeps getting abducted and dropped back to Earth by a UFO there in the pits. He's not a factor, but between Julian Ditchburn, who's right in front of this man, Antonio Reese, actually, you can see him negotiating some lap traffic already. I believe that's Michael McConnell exiting the pits quite a long ways back of everyone after that incident very early on. But yeah, a whole lot of room for these drivers to work with. Right now, Stevie Ray is coming out of turn number 9, about to go into the turn 10 hairpin. Meanwhile, our leader, Julian Ditchburn, is just about to enter turn number 3 in the not too distant future. So a very big window if these drivers want to go for the undercut. I think that may be the reason why they're doing it.
Yeah, well, I would agree. There's probably going to be several of those that are going to try that. Stevie's always early. He's usually, that's how we know the pit cycle or the pit window's open, because Stevie's usually the first guy in. It's just the way he normally runs his races. And so you may see some guys, especially with a huge gap like that between P1, P2, and then the rest of the group. Well, actually, even P3 to P4 is another 3.5 seconds. So basically, the three podium sitters are basically on their own and running a lap. So the guys behind may have to try and a little strategy to see if they can maximize their lap times, especially in the conditions that we've got right now.
I gotta imagine at this point, Julian Ditchburn is probably on his phone by now. He has a 5-second gap, and that gap has actually increased ever since we last mentioned his gap. It was around 4.5 seconds at that point. It's still teetering around that, occasionally going north of 5 seconds. Yeah, it still has a pretty decent margin as things stand at the moment over himself and Antonio Reese. And Benjamin Harris is actually pulling away from Tulo and Green. I think Montgomery, who's acting like a pick in that fight throughout a vast majority of it, I think he may have... There may have been some, I wouldn't say foul play, but I think there may have been some trickery that increased these the drivers' gap between all these drivers as things stand at the moment. Getting all my words caught up here, just trying to figure out what may have happened here. Chris Montgomery was in between those two cars, and it was only about a second separating Harris and Tulo. I'm trying to do the math in my head, probably about 3.5 minutes ago. But now, as we just click over the 9-minute mark of this 40-minute race, Harris currently has a pretty massive gap between the cars behind him. This, I think, may have been what caused it. This Jason Green, we're following him heading into the turn 10 hairpin, and that's very close. I think may have came to blows with Montgomery going side by side coming around the hairpin of turn number 10. So I think maybe Montgomery just may have, I think that could have been what happened. I think Montgomery just held him up.
Yeah, maybe that's kind of looks like we're getting another back to live action here as we're seeing Montgomery behind Chris Murakami. So yeah, it's kind of just what it looked like, because turn 3 is, like I said, it's very tricky. It's downhill, really open corner that kind of tightens up, and you're cresting a hill, so that kind of reduces the amount of traction your tires are going to have. So yeah, it's not great in dry conditions. It's probably horrific in wet. So yeah, it was. Oh, as we see a little walk up and a slide there by Green. I think they just kind of misjudged the braking zone there between himself and Tolo.
I think maybe he locked up the rears there. Either way, Jason Green, he got away with that with a clean race car, maybe not with clean pants, and we're going to take a look at a replay heading into turn number 12, which feels like it comes out of nowhere. Now I think he just clipped the paint there, that painted outside curb. Any sort of surface that isn't asphalt or concrete in the rain just feels like a giant slip and slide. I know the racing that I used to do in real life, doing some autocross at the Philly region of the SCCA, we used to have a strip of metal. We used to race on an old Naval Air Development Station outside of Philadelphia, and they had a metal strip running along this disused airfield, and whenever we'd go on that, they would always say, hey, keep the wheel completely straight, especially if you're running in the rain, because you have absolutely no grip on a surface like that. And I think that may have been the reason why Jason Green had a very I wouldn't say I could probably say traumatic moments heading into turn number 12. Thankfully for him, he got away with it fairly scot-free and still has a decent gap between himself and the cars farther behind. So I don't think he will try and replicate that. However, he got away with it fairly smooth there, Charles.
Yeah, absolutely. He did get away with it. And you're right. And, any of those painted surfaces are going to feel like that you're just basically like you've hit a banana peel or ice cube or ice cheat or whatever. So just no traction there. So he did a good job just hang on to the car. Lost just a little bit of time, not a lot, but it's, definitely early enough that, time can be made up.
Still a lot of waves left to go here in this race. That's Brad Cathcart. I think he's been in the pits for a while now. So actually, no, I'm confusing him with a very similar looking race car. I think I've seen him in the pits already in this race. Either way, does he have that car? I think either that or his helmet is actually blending in quite well. Ooh, yeah, 50 seconds here, so I think I think Brad Cathcart, who did not have a very ideal qualifying session, may be calling it a day here already in this Formula Ford Weekend Warriors race. 12 minutes in to this 40-minute affair here, and we've already seen a lot of drama break out. I think we hit our incidents quota just with that shamazel that happened, heading through turns 1 and 2 right now. I think at this stage, it's kind of a matter of just wearing away the laps, getting to those final 10 minutes, and really waiting until then to start pushing it a bit more, because we've seen these drivers go off the track. It's cold, and it's rainy, and it is very easy to make a mistake at a track with 14 corners, none of which are the same as the others. There's so many twists and turns here at this track. Literally and figuratively, we'll just see a lot of drivers maybe take it easy in this midsection of the race.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right as we see Nick Tilla coming into the pits. And I will say that Stevie Ray's also towed and exited the server. So I think it was about the same time that Cathcart came in. So there might have been some contact between those. So I won't speculate too much. But so we see Wobolt now entering the pits for his probably only pit stop of the race. And it's about, the 13-minute mark. So early stop, get him some clean air, and see if he can make up some ground. I'm just kind of wondering, we talked about how slick this is. There's like stone pavers on the pit road. I just kind of wonder how that would feel in a Formula Ford car driving through there.
It's like driving around Center City, Philadelphia. My brother used to live on one of like narrowest streets in the city that was paved with cobblestone. And that's basically what we have here in the pit lane. Actually, no, the pit lane is wider than the street that my brother used to live in back in the early 2010s. But either way, I wonder if that's going to play a role here in this race. A bit more abrasive considering it's pretty much brickwork that they're driving on. However, we may see some drivers try and push the limits of that surface. Maybe they were testing it during the practice sessions and the qualifying session, seeing how far and how deep they can go on the brakes. Because if we see a driver overshoot their pit box, we saw it last time out at Oschersleben, we may see that play a role here. And this is Stevie Ray, and going for a spin through turn number 3, a very long drift. Does he keep it going in the right direction? No, he spins. I think he may be... That is so annoying. Just a tiny bit of contact, but it still, I think, broke his rear end. And sadly, I think Stevie Ray, he may. That's always so frustrating, and it's an infuriating incident to have too. It's like I'm okay, I'm spinning, and then just a tiniest bit of contact right at the end of that results in race-ending damage. Not ideal for Stevie Ray, but thankfully for him, we'll be seeing him later on today, hopefully with the Spec Racer Fords, and also on Tuesday for the Ray Esports Racing League. That's always exciting with the races we have there. But speaking of the racing that we have right now, Chris Murakami, who we saw thread the needle at the very start of the race, is currently running in P7 lock steady in a nice fight between himself and Chris Montgomery as well. So how do you feel about Murakami in this race so far, Charles?
Well, I mean, I think Montgomery just passed him, so I don't think he's quite got the pace to do anything, especially with the gap that Antonio Races got up front. I mean, it's 23 seconds between P1 and P2 in the Masters class. And then likewise between Ditchburn and Montgomery is 29 seconds, or almost 30 seconds now. Ditchburn's just basically checked out. He's even putting time on Race in second place, as well, and Race is putting time on Tolo in third. So it's so the cars that are up front, because they had good pace, are staying up front and extending their leads.
That is a good point that we kind of just glossed past there. We didn't notice that Thortulo has actually taken the lead in that S1 category, currently up 4 positions from where he started. I'm cutting through. We always like to talk about the drivers cutting their way through the field like a hot knife through butter.
Whoa.
But ooh, as there's a spin there for Morn Human, who was running inside the top 10, was involved in that incident at the very start of this race, and sadly for him, another incident is going to, I wouldn't say ruin his race. He's still on track and has 4 wheels on his wagon, but dropping down to P14. That is not ideal for the South African driver, and I think we're going to take a look at some replays here of the action that's happened all throughout this field. This is a move that Thortulo put on to take the lead in that S1 category over Benjamin Harris, heading his way into turn number 10 here. The hairpin, a very tricky hairpin, goes down the inside. Actually, Jason Green nearly following him there, and there you go, Thortulo putting on a fairly textbook move there. Of course, in the rain, no move is textbook or easy in any way, shape, or form. But Thortulo there, cutting his way through the field quite nicely, and is now in the lead of the S1 category. Actually, no, I believe that's what happened to Benjamin Harris there. I was getting confused a teeny tiny bit there. I think that was a move he put on Chris Montgomery not very long ago, and then Benjamin Harris goes for a spin coming out of turn 14, so Harris may be kicking himself after that.
Yeah, for sure. It's a tough place, and I couldn't tell. A little glitch with the replay, so I couldn't tell if he bounced it off the barrier or not. So the deal. Let's hope it's not a race ender. So
he was fine.
Yep, cool. So so the thing about Human is he spun a little bit, but he's been showing some pretty good pace. He was running up front, so he made a quick mistake. It was obviously qualified really well to be up in the front of the group before we had the contact with Monty. So he's got time. It's still 22 minutes left in the race. We're just not even at halfway point yet. So he's got time to make up some positions on the grid, especially with the fact that it seems like we've got quite a few drivers out there that are struggling a bit with the weather.
This is a replay of Chris Murakami getting past Montgomery here. You can see Montgomery is quite a long ways farther up the road, heading through turns 3 and 4. And yeah, Montgomery goes for a spin. A half spin there. He got stopped without losing complete control. However, that half spin forced him to get to a complete stop in the runoff area of turn number 4. Not ideal there for Chris Montgomery. It's Chris Murakami and Chris Montgomery, the two Chris's currently locked steady in a nice fight right towards the tail end of the top 6. Montgomery at this stage, despite the fact he's 35 seconds off of his competitor here in the S2 category, you can't really blame him too much. He's put together a pretty good drive as things stand at the moment. However, it's going to be an uphill climb, I think, for him to hold on to that P2 spot in S2 as things stand at the moment. Grinnan, the Master driver, currently running P8 overall, and David Foy running P3 in the S2 category. They're catching up to him quite quickly here, so I think Montgomery may be chopped meat here, chopped liver soon. What do you think, Charles?
I think you may be right. Yeah, it's that battle from P6 Murakami down to, I mean, basically it's the next 8 or 10 cars. They're all just kind of running together, and so they're going to be battling. And as soon as somebody makes a mistake, you'll see somebody go around and get a position. But then they've got to try and hold it. As we saw, I saw 2 cars spin. That's Garrett's and Human as well. So as we see Grennan dropping down. So it's just it's speed's one thing, but you have to be consistent, and that seems to be lacking just a little bit with the tricky conditions as we see Human just. Just the lightest little touch there at the end.
Oh, that's such an unfortunate accident there for Garrett. It's very similar to what Stevie Ray had not very long ago, heading through that section as well. He was clean. He was out of the way of Morn Human, and that just gets clipped a tiny bit. It's a matter of pixels. Oh, it's unfortunate for sure, because Garrett's was putting together a pretty good race and just gets a little bit of contact. I think he'll be lucky to get away with that there. He may have a little bit of suspension damage, because that was a decent whack there to that rear end of the race car. Ooh, as he nearly makes contact there with Bose, who runs wide coming out of turn number 12 here. Those two may battle here in the not too distant future. They're 54 seconds back of our leader, Julian Ditchburn, who I think may be having to deal with lap traffic here very soon. That's Garrett coming into the pits from P14. Actually just gets passed by Spinel, who moves into the top 15 for the first time in a while. The driver that started up towards the front is making his way through the field very nicely. It'll be nice to see where Spinel may end up once we take the checkered flag in about 18 minutes time.
Yeah, because at this point you just don't really know. I mean, it seems like that we've got guys that have really good pace, but just making a few mistakes. And I think I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, turn 3 was going to be tricky, because it's tricky in the dry, so the wet just makes it that much worse. And that's where we're seeing most of our incidents are coming through that section of track.
Honestly, every single section of this track, we've seen drivers stub their toe on so far. And may I point something out real quick? Michael McConnell, who was involved in that incident, you can see from the graphic that we have, was in the pits for 2 minutes and 44.7 seconds. He's still running just on the doors of the top 20. I don't believe he's on the lead lap. We may have to switch graphics here so I can fact check myself live to see if McConnell is still on the lead lap. Either way, the fact he is just barely outside the top 20 after being in the pits for about 3.5, that's enough to go downstairs and like make yourself a sandwich while you're stopped in the pits. So the fact that McConnell he's not on the lead lap, which is a bit of a shame. However, he's still only 1 lap down after spending about 3 minutes down pit road. So Michael McConnell is definitely not out of the race to finish inside the top 20. Lap traffic going to play a big factor here in this race, and we're going to see plenty of drivers rejoin this race. Manning Brennan is about to rejoin the racing surface, currently in P23. The last of the drivers still in this session, Morn Human, after an unfortunate start to this race, an unfortunate race altogether, he has actually left the session here. So a lot of drivers getting caught out by the tricky conditions here in Norway with the rain as well as these very cold temperatures. A lot of drivers tripping up with it. Ooh, as we see Montgomery getting a move done around the outside of Chris Murakami heading through turn number 4. Nicely played there.
That was a very nice move. Yeah, and I was looking just to check to see McConnell is actually in that 9-second gap between P1 and P2. So he's the first car a lap down, but obviously is still with a chance to get a few more positions before this race is over, just based on how the race is going at this point.
There's still a lot of stuff that can happen between now and the checkered flag. We could see a meteorite crash into this track and just turn turns 1 and 2 into a giant ditch. However, I don't think that will be the case. Of course, iRacing, they just got rain in here. It'll probably be until like 2048 when they simulate meteorite impacts. So that's not going to be a factor here in this race. Paul Jackson battling, I believe this is himself and True, battling for the final positions inside the top 20. These two drivers running in the S2 category category, battling quite hard. True running a little bit wide, heading through the turn 3 and 4 section there. That runoff area is probably used more often than the racing surface itself, especially in the rainy conditions here at this track. A lot of drivers running wide, and Paul Jackson running off of the road there. He hit that inside curve there, going through turn number 5, I believe it was, and just got tripped up quite a lot. Hit that paint. We mentioned it again, the paint catching these drivers out. Now Antonio Reese in P2 is coming up to lap him.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say this: you were right about one thing. iRacing did not make a fool out of you. It is still raining, and we're 25 minutes into the race. So the forecast, I thought it looked like it was going to start easing off, and it was just going to be a wet track, wet to drying. But nope, not the case. Still raining here with about 15 minutes left to go.
I think while that we're in somewhat of a lull in this race, watching Julian Ditchburn continue to pull that gap over Antonio Reese, about 9.5 seconds as things stand at the moment. Then the gap between Reese and Tulo is fairly substantial there. Tulo in P3 is 23 seconds back of this man, Julian Ditchburn, who's commanded this race ever since we grabbed the green flag. Granted, a lot of the drivers that started inside the top 5 and the top 6 did spear off the circuit right at the very beginning of it. However, it takes a whole lot of talent to keep a Formula Ford race car on the road at a track like this with 14 corners, 14, actually more than 14, we'll just say 14 for convenience sakes, 14 opportunities to make a mistake. Julian Ditchburn has kept it clean all throughout it. Knowing my luck, I probably just jinxed him. We still have about 15 coming up to 14 minutes left to go here in this race. However, Julian Ditchburn is being absolutely dominant as we see Jacobson coming into the pits. Jeff Jacobson pitting from the P11 spot there. So we may see some drivers inside the top 10 finally decide to come down pit road. We saw him come in earlier. However, we may see the inverse of that, where we saw the likes of Stevie Ray pit 6 minutes in. We may see Julian Ditchburn, our leader of pits, with about 6 minutes left to go.
Yep, absolutely. Ditchburn's doing a great job. I think he's found the wet racing line and is driving it to perfection. Nobody can just, it seems like he would get a gap over Race, and it seems like Race would get a couple of good laps and tighten it back up. But then Ditchburn it's been really consistent and is setting just quick laps, every lap. So he's doing a great job as we see Jacobson getting back out in. So now he's going to have to he's got his fuel, and he's got to make his way down into 3 and kind of hang on to it till we get a little more heat in the tires. So hopefully he can get this done pretty easily. Looks like he has got the line right. Looks like he's got the speed right. Yeah. So nice, successful turn 3 and 4. So he can continue on with his race.
Antonio Reese has come into the pits from P at number 2, slowly trundling his way down pit road, running on that cobblestone there, so we're going to see him come into the pits eventually. I mentioned this earlier on in this broadcast, and I'll bring it up again. I wonder how these drivers are going to try and attack actually getting stopped in their box. Are they going to be a little bit aggressive, or are they going to keep it clean? Antonio Reese was fairly clean there. He was fairly smooth coming in, didn't overshoot it, as was Jason Green. So I think with these treacherous conditions that these drivers are negotiating, they're not really pushing the envelope too much when it comes to coming into the pits. Antonio Reese exited 48.4 seconds stopped and spent down pit road. We'll see how long Green was. 43.3 seconds there. So about 5 seconds quicker down pit road than Antonio Reese. I wonder why Reese spent so much time down the pits.
It wasn't the stoppage time. It was only, I think the gap between was like a second and a half between Reese and Green. So obviously I think that Reese was just taking a little bit easier on pit entry, not wanting to potentially crash the car into the Armco barriers on either side as he was coming in. So just a little bit safer, and it actually cost him a position because he was jumped by Spinell during his pit stop. So Spinell will, I think, inherit the overall P2 once everybody's pitted.
This would be a fantastic recovery try for Sam Spittle, who spun in turn number 1, was involved in that Shamazo at the very start of this race. However, he's cut through the field quite nicely and nearly actually cut Fernandez's rear tire down as he went through turn number 10 there not very long ago. That was close on corner exit. Thankfully, Sam Spittle gets through it clean. Fortunately for him, these Formula Ford cars do not have front wings. If they did, it'd basically be a wood plank bolted onto the front of these race cars. So thankfully for him, he didn't have anything, well, too much to damage at the front end of that race car. However, that was definitely very close, trying to avoid crashing into any cars through the spray. Sam Spittle now inheriting P number 7 with Chris Montgomery now coming into the pits, getting the move done to move into P number 6. That's him and Paul Stevens going side by side, heading into turn number 1. Gets a move done fairly convincingly for Sam Spittle, the Brit driver, who I think earlier on in this race was running outside the top 25. So if he manages to pull off a top 2 or just an overall podium, that would be a fantastic result. But I'm sure Thor Tulo wants something to say about it. He is going to try like hell to try and grab that win in the S1 category, because he's led it for a vast majority of it. He is not going to let a driver who he hasn't battled with at all throughout this race, he's not going to let him try and take that position clean.
Oh, no, absolutely not. There's still, still plenty of racing left, and they're still racing hard. So yeah, it's going to be a battle once these cars get close to each other for position. It's just going to be, it's going to be a battle just like every other race that we do. So if they can get close, they'll try and make the move to get around.
We still are waiting for some of the drivers up towards the front of the field to come down pit road. Thor Tulo staying out for another lap here, so I wonder if these drivers are trying to do what we were theorizing could happen, what we saw at Sebring a couple weeks ago, with these drivers waiting until the dying stages of this race to come in. We have less than 10 minutes left to go here, coming up to 9 in a few moments' time. And Chris Murakami moves up into P number 4 as David Foy is now down pit road. The driver currently running P2 in that S2 category has now gone his way into the pits. Is Chris Murakami, who's currently running in P4 and battling with lap traffic there. My apologies. He is quite a long ways off of Benjamin Harris, who's currently in P3 as things stand at the moment. The second driver in that S1 category. And there you can see David Foy stopped on the pit lane. It's a very odd section of pit road to be stopped on, because he has just a random fence that you'd see at like a local town parade. And then I guess those are Jersey barriers that he stopped next to. So David Foy using some of the added room here at the Rudskogen pit lane to get the job done. And he's going to be exiting the pits a little bit on the slow end there, 36.3 seconds, 46.3 seconds down pit road, my apologies. And then John Toms will be exiting out. Spent 2 minutes and 7 seconds down pit road. That is not ideal for him at all. This is not ideal for Marin Grinning going for a spin, heading through turn number 4. I wonder, I think you mentioned this earlier on in this broadcast here, Charles, a lot of banana peels down there in turn number 3 and 4.
Yeah. Once again, it's that's probably it's a matter of the right line and the right throttle and being smooth through there, and the rain is just not helping. So we see side by side here between Murakami and Spinell. This is a battle for P4.
Ooh, very close between those two.
Yep. Yeah, I think I'm just kind of looking at it is, Murakami had the racing line if it's dry track, right? I think the extra yardage out there allowed Spindle to just kind of get more momentum going on the outside of that corner, and is able to make the pass. But then a little deep into 1 and 2, and allowed Murakami to close up just a little bit as they head down toward turn 3.
I gotta say, Chris Murakami has put together a pretty good race. He was in the midst of that chaos at the very start of it and navigated through quite nicely. And as things stand at the moment, he is leading in the Masters category, running P5 overall. As things stand at the moment, Antonio Reese getting held up by lap traffic here, heading through the 3 and 4 section. Doesn't want to push it too hard, though. He does not want to end up like many of his competitors have, heading through that section here. Antonio Reese is he's in a little bit of a sandwich here. That's the 380, actually 388 there that was holding him up a teeny tiny bit, heading through the S's section there. And then he's going to hit Paul Stevens here once he gets that move done on the lap traffic. Paul Stevens farther up the road. The driver currently running P2 in the S2 category as things stand, with about 6 minutes left to go here. Less than 6 laps though, for sure. I think probably around 4 laps at this stage of this race, so not a whole lot of time for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure, not a lot of time left, and we should see the rest of the cars come in either on this lap or the following lap. It's to the point now that they're going to be coming in 35-36 minute mark as we see Spinell going around again. I will say that battle with him and Murakami helped out Reese, but Murakami still hasn't pitted yet, so he's still got to come in for a pit stop. So that actually did help Antonio out a little bit to hold up Spinell for a few corners, allowed him to make up a little bit of time, and has made that gap. It's brought it down to about 5.5 seconds or so. So it's still a pretty big gap. So Antonio's going to have to race hard to see if he can make that time up against a fairly adept driver in Sam Spinell.
One driver who's not going to be racing hard right now has been driving quite fantastically throughout this race. However, as things stand with a 31-second gap to Tulo, Julian Dishburn has now come down pit road. I was going to say he's probably not going to push it too much here, because as things stand at the moment, even once he comes in along with Tulo and Harris, he's going to have a pretty massive gap between himself and Sam Spinell there. So Julian Dishburn really has no reason to take any sort of risk here. So we'll see how long he's down pit road. Fingers crossed for his sakes that he has the tire change option turned off. That would be disastrous and truly heartbreaking for Julian Dishburn, who's dominated this race from start to finish. He's not going up on jacks, so I think he got that taken care of. Tulo, who's leading in S1 as things stand at the moment, probably not for long now, as he's come down pit road along with Benjamin Harris. So Julian Ditchburn is going to be exiting the pits. We'll see how long he trundles down this pit lane here. Very similar, actually quicker than Sam Spinell there. So Julian Ditchburn really staking his claim on this race with about 4 minutes left on the clock. Thor Tulo as well trundling down pit road. It feels like a snail's pace considering how fast you're going down this track, going down the start finish straight away and around this track all together. To be trundling down pit road at what feels like an absolute snail's pace is always torturous. Thor Tulo is going to be exiting. He led in S1 throughout a vast majority of it, but with Spinell and his fantastic race that he's put together so far, he is going to be dominant in that S1 category as things stand at the moment. Benjamin Harris is actually spent quite a decent amount of time down pit road, so not ideal for him. He's going to be exiting at quite a long ways back of Thor Tulo. There is currently P6 overall. I wonder, what fights are we going to have between now and the finish? Or do you think, as we mentioned earlier on, is it just going to be a matter of seeing that checkered flag?
I think that I'm sitting here looking at, we're at 37 minutes, just about. Murakami's still yet to pit. If he can make this without stopping, that battle between him and Race for the last 2 laps is going to be crazy, I think, because those are the two of the closest cars together on track. Between, you can see them right there, between Murakami, Race, and then a little further back, Jason Green, as they're navigating around some lap traffic. So yeah, if Murakami can stretch it and can go without stopping, that would be a master move to be able to take the Masters of Class win and a P3 overall. So it's we'll have to wait and see. It's we're coming up to the very end of the race, so he doesn't have many more opportunities to make that dive into the pits.
Speaking of dive, I'm curious if Antonio Reese is going to try and dive around Chris Murakami. You can see there's barely any air separating them. Going down the start-finish straight away right now, Antonio Reese, currently P4, P2 of the Masters drivers. Chris Murakami yet to come in. I think at this track, with the kind of racing we've seen so far, it is, I wouldn't say it's easy, however, it definitely is possible to make it, just not even bothering coming down pit road. That would be a masterstroke from Chris Murakami to end up doing this entire race on a single tank of gas. This track not really reliant on those long straightaways. The longest one here on this lap is going down the start-finish straight and going around before we go into turn 3. Speaking of going around, Antonio Reese just went around the outside of Chris Murakami heading through turn 4 to get the move done to move into the lead of the Masters category with barely any time left to go here in this race. Only a minute and a half left to go, so I believe these drivers are going to be taking a white flag in the not too distant future. Ditchburn is just absolutely dominant in this race. 15-second gap as things stand at the moment, heading his way around the final corner right now, soon to take that white flag.
Yep, this will be the white flag lap, and so it'll be Murakami's last chance to come in. You obviously see that he's trying to save fuel, but you know he's trying to save fuel, but he needs to have enough to be able to battle race for that final podium position. So I don't know if he's going to have enough or not, as we see him just kind of losing a little more time to him and falling back into the front of that lap car.
This is not really good for Chris Murakami. I wonder if that Formula Ford car is going to start coughing. He hasn't come down pit road. Oh, no. This is a very late decision from Chris Murakami to go off the track. Was that just a very strange snap? It looked like...
Yeah, I think so.
I feel like what may have happened there actually was him being like, should I come down pit road? It looked like he just snapped the wheel to the left hand, well, to go left hand down as he was coming around that right-hander of turn number 14. So I think maybe Kurt Murakami, I think he's going to be struggling to hold on to that top 5 spot as things stand at the moment. Michael McConnell, who's currently running a P13, he has gone back on the lead lap. That is very impressive for the driver who spent 2 minutes and 44 seconds in the pits towards the very beginning, battling right towards the tail end of the top 15. That is incredibly impressive for the American driver. We'll see what he can do, involved in a nice fight between himself and DeGas. Sam Spindle has put together a fantastic drive as well, currently 14 seconds back of Julian Ditchburn, who's going to be taking a checkered flag in the not too distant future. Jason Green is his next closest competitor in the S2 category, just many seconds back, 15 seconds separating the two drivers at the top of S2 right now. So that is not going to be a fight that we are going to see develop between now and the end of it. Speaking of Julian Ditchburn, it's going to be the first time in my memory seeing an S2 driver win overall here in the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors, but he does it. Julian Ditchburn, the Canadian, wins overall, which is a fantastic result when it comes to his championship fight. To see an S2 driver take the checkered flag overall is mightily impressive, and he put on a mighty fantastic drive. Sam Spindle, speaking of mighty fantastic drives, at one point he was backwards and around, was involved in that incident at the very start of this race. However, Sam Spindle ends up taking the checkered flag at P2. Chris Murakami coming into the pits, coming to the checkered flag. Is he filling out the obligation that he has to come down pit road here? I think he just is, but this is still going to sting. I think he's still going to finish ahead of DeGassis, who's going to end up being about a minute and 17 seconds back of your winner, Julian Ditchburn. So I think Chris Murakami, he take the checker flag in P number 7. So that's still, it's not ideal for Chris Murakami. It looked like he was in the catbird seat to possibly win in Masters. However, he still ends up P2 in class, which is definitely a good result there for the driver of the number 901 car, Benjamin Harris, coming to a stop there right outside of turn number 2. And Charles, this race, it didn't have the heart-thumping action that we usually see here from the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors, but we saw some really intriguing strategy throughout it as well. Just how important do you think strategy was in the other race that we just had?
I mean, I think for Murakami, that was still a great call. He ended up 7th, and he ended up, how many positions did he gain? Give a look at my timing and scoring there. So, yeah, gained 7 spots. So, good drive by him. So, I think the rest of it was just basically once they had that incident at turn 1 on the first lap, I mean, Ditchburn just set sail and just drove a perfect race. I mean, not a foot wrong, and kept the car clean from start to finish. It was exactly what you need to do. And was really in control of his car for the entire duration. And so hats off to him. Yet I don't remember I can't remember a time that I saw S2 driver win the overall. I know it's happened. I wish I had my buddy Tim Cox's notebook, because he keeps up with all that, and he could have gave the number. But yeah, congrats to Ditchburn for just a fantastic race.
We may have to buy that that notebook that our old friend Tim Cox kept. I feel like to get it shipped from the UK here to the US, it would probably cost about $14 bajillion. So we'd have to pay an arm, a leg, and our entire life savings just to get that book of his. But still, if it is the case, history being made here at Rudskogen here for the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors. I believe all the cars have taken the checkered flag now, so I think we'll get the results here in just a few moments' time from an interesting race for sure. Rain affected, a lot of the drivers dancing in the rain, singing in the rain, some upset, some absolutely ecstatic. Julian Ditchburn is the one that's probably feeling the most happy after how that race went. He ends up taking the win as an S2 driver overall. Sam Spinell ends up behind in P number 2, 13.2 seconds gap separating those two when they took the checkered flag. Then Antonio Reese, a Masters driver, taking, I think, his first win in the Masters category in these Formula Ford races for quite some time. He ends up in P at number 3, then Jason Green in 4th, and Thor Tulo is going to round out your top 5. That's Benjamin Harris in P number 6. Chris Murakami, with that Master Stroke strategy, still ends up in the top 10 overall and ends up P2. In the Masters category, David Foy quite a long ways back of his S2 rival. He ends up in P8 in this race. Paul Stevens, pretty good show from him. He ends up in 9th. Chris Montgomery in 10th. Philip Fernandez in 11th. Michael McConnell there in P number 12. Great drive from him after being at 1 point a lap down and spending about 3.5 minutes down pit road. Pretty good to end up in P number 12. That's Alan DeGassis in 13th. Jeff Jacobson 14th. And Dana Bowes will round out your top 15.
Yeah, Paul Jackson in 16th, Nick Tolo in 17th, Johan Batinga at 18th. We go here to page 2. And we've got Peter True in 19th, lap down. Manning Grennan, 20th. John Thompson, 21st. Pedro Carvalho in 22nd. Soren Garrett's in 23rd. Morn Human had a great start, not such a great finish. 24th. Bill Walker, 25th. Gary Wolbolt, Stevie Ray, Brad Cathcart, 26th through 28th. Fernando Suarez in 29th, Russ Telker in 30th, and Mr. No Luck himself, York Monty, in 31st, ending was the first guy out today. It's tough to see.
And not ideal. Fingers crossed that he has some good turn of luck between now and the end of the season, which is coming up towards the start of June. But with the results out of the way, I think we can have a chat with some of these drivers after this very interesting Formula Ford race. Charles, who do you like to have a chat with?
Well, let's talk with, because I always like to talk to the Masters guys. So let's talk to our Masters winner, Antonio Race. We'll get him in here. Antonio, congratulations on the Masters win. P3 overall. Look like some very tough conditions out there today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, guys. Good night. Well, sorry, I was messing around with my sound system. I couldn't listen to your question.
Oh, I said look like pretty tough conditions out there today.
Yeah. It was really very, very tough. So I have to drive very carefully. Even I couldn't avoid the spin one time. So, well, it is what it is.
Yeah. So we saw a lot of drivers having a real problem with turn 3, especially just because you're at pretty much top speed or as much as you can manage in the wet. And then just looked like people were just really misjudging the amount of grip and how much speed they need to take through there.
Yeah, I think that was the third where I spun as well. So yeah, we have kind of to be very gentle there. And then if we abuse a little, then we are done. It's kind of the tricky turn.
Yeah. So hey, we'll be in the spec racers coming up, I'm assuming.
Yeah, sure. I'll be there.
So no rain, so we don't have to worry about that. So congratulations, yeah. Antonio.
Okay. Thank you. Good to see you. Bye.
And that was Antonio Reese, who ends up the top of the Masters. Glad to hear that we'll be seeing him later on this afternoon in the Spec Racer Fords, and we'll bring in another driver, the top driver in the S1 category, that being Sam Spinell, had a very up and down race here today. Sam, thank you for joining us here in the commentary booth. It was a interesting race from your end for sure. How was it out there?
Yeah, really good. I mean, I was coaching in real life today, so I arrived maybe 10 minutes before quali, so I didn't have much time to practice, and then quali went quite well. Unfortunately, at the start, got caught up in that incident, so I just decided to pit early, get out of traffic, and not I knew I'd lose a lot of time overtaking, and unfortunately my calculator messed up, so it was telling me I didn't have enough fuel in. And then on the last, when Julian pitted, it updated, so I could finally push at the end. But until then, I was having to lift a couple meters before every braking zone, which in the wet didn't really lose too much time.
I have to say that early pit stop turned out to be a masterclass of strategy there. You were running, I think, at one point outside the top 25 here in this race, end up moving it up to P number 2. So just talk us through the emotions up and down day for sure, gang, involved in that incident at the very start, and then ending up taking the checkered flag in P number 2 in the top of the S1 driver. So just talk us through the emotion side of things here from this race.
Oh, I think because I can't lose any iRating, I was quite calm when I got hit. But I do a lot of endurance, so I just kept calm. I knew if I pitted, I could get. But then again, halfway through the race, in your mind, you're wondering, has this guy pitted? Has he not? And I knew I'd come some sort in the top 5, but I was surprised when I came out in second.
I think still overall a pretty good day from you in the office behind the wheel of that Formula Ford race car. And now the next time we'll be seeing this series is going to be at Belle Isle in a week's time, that fantastic street circuit in America that has sadly gone the way of the Dodo Bird. So how do you fancy your chances there?
Yeah, I'll definitely put a bit more practice in and then see. I think in the championship it should be a good lead now, so yeah, I'll just keep calm and just get as many points as possible.
I'll tell you, it was a complete masterclass drive from you. You may ended up P2 on the racetrack. However, I think that may have been a P1 drive from your perspective. That is for darn sure. Sam Spinell, thank you for joining us here in the commentary booth. Is there anyone you want to give a thanks to or shout out?
Yeah, my partner for letting me race, and because I was out away all weekend, so for her to just let me chill and race that straight away was amazing. So thank you to her and to you guys and the organizers.
There you go, Sam. Thank you for joining us here in the commentary booth. Hope to see you next time out at Belle Isle.
Thank you very much.
And that was Sam Spinell, who ends up P2 here in this race and P1 in the S1 category. And he mentioned it there. It's going to be interesting to see how Belle Isle is going to be in 1 week's time, running on that street circuit, which I dearly, dearly miss. I personally prefer it a lot more than the current street course that we have in downtown Detroit. But Belle Isle it's one of the only other Formula Ford races that I've called before this season started. I remember doing that with Andy Thompson here on Apex Racing TV, who's going to be part of the Radical European Championship broadcast. That'll be starting right after we wrap things up here. But Charles, I'll ask you this as well. How do you think Belle Isle is going to be in a week's time?
So from what I remember from the last visit to Belle Isle, we had a couple incidents early when the field was bunched up, but it was overall it's a pretty clean race. I was really impressed with the way the drivers handled the track, because it's a very difficult track. It's just a flat, tight street circuit. There's a couple of nice straightaways that you can get a good run on, but for the most part, it's really technical. If it rains, I have no idea. I don't even want to really think about it, to be honest. It could be one of the worst races we've ever had. But these drivers, as we've seen, there's some really good wet weather drivers out there. So we'll have some guys that are running up front that are going to put on a good show, and even the guys that are still trying and maybe struggling a bit will be giving it their all to try and get a good result.
I'm kind of with you there, Charles. I think if I were one of these drivers and we get to Belle Isle in a week's time and the forecast is like 100% chance of rain and the same 65-degree track temperatures that we saw for this race here at Rudskogen, I would probably cry myself to sleep that night. But I think I'll just leave it off at that. But Belle Isle in 1 week's time is going to be absolutely intense, as is the Spec Racer Ford race that we have coming up at this very track in a couple of moments' time. In less than an hour, in fact, that broadcast is going to be started. That is going to be intense. Thankfully, we won't have to deal with the rain there. However, that race at Rudskogen is going to be very, very interesting, much like this one here for the Formula Fords. And usually when I talk about Super Sunday here on Apex Racing TV, I'm mainly referring to the Weekend Warriors, but we are absolutely packed here on Apex Racing TV today. Stay tuned for the Spec Race Awards coming up in about an hour's time, but in between then, you can either tune into the Championship Motorsports iRacing Team Endurance Series broadcast that's currently going on at Silverstone. That's their season finale. And we also have the Radical Sim Racing European Championship broadcast at Interlagos that's starting in a couple of moments' time. You're definitely not spoiled for choice here on Apex Racing TV on this Sunday, but I think for the Formula Fords here at Rudskogen, round 7 of the season, I think that will just about do it. So for myself, Ron Mullins, Charles Bichelle joining me in the commentary booth, and Josh Wilkie working all the cameras in the virtual production hauler, I say thank you all so very much for watching, and we hope to see you for the SRFs in just a couple of moments' time.
Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.